LCC, and welcome to the 2020 Digital LGBT Plus Global Business Summit. Before we get started on the session, CGLTC would like to recognise our presenting sponsor, TD Bank Group, along with all of our gold and silver sponsors and all of our sponsors for helping us to make this event happen. We would also like to recognise our translation partner, AI Media, for enabling us to deliver live caption translation in 3 languages, English, French and Spanish, and you can access those using the links below in the description box. I'd also like to draw your attention to the left-hand side of your screen to the networking and exhibit hall tabs, where over the course of the next 5 days you can connect with LGBT plus businesses, corporations and each other to help drive that power of connection. And finally, if you do like the content we are producing, please feel free to make a financial contribution using the donate link in the description box below. Thank you and enjoy your session. Well, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Examining the LGBT plus Business Landscape session. I'm Dale McDermott, I'm the COO of the CGLTC. I'm joined by a very much esteemed set of panelists. We have Gavin Armstrong, founder and president of Lucky Iron Fish Enterprise and also Dragon Slayer. We have Grant Minish, who is the regional manager for LGBTQ2+ business development at TD Bank, who are also our presenting sponsor. And we're also joined by Baba Rasset, who is the founder and CEO of Virtual Gurus. You're all very welcome, panelists, to this session. So this session is to examine the LGBT plus business landscape. In 2019, CGLTC, in partnership with TD Bank and Nielsen, conducted a national research study of LGBT plus businesses. And before we delve into this discussion, I would like to just go through some of those key findings in a presentation. So I'll just get that up here now. So if we're to look at the SME landscape itself, there are some key findings which I think are quite interesting for all of our viewers. We do know that around 1 in 40 businesses across Canada are LGBT plus majority owned or operated, and that actually equates to around 28,000 businesses across Canada, a sizable number in terms of a constituency. And I think this really echoes the influence which I think LGBT plus businesses have in terms of impact on the Canadian economy. If we're to look at kind of the structure of those businesses, we do know that of the businesses which are 50% or greater owned by LGBT plus people, we do know that around 74% are sole proprietors, which is different when you compare that to the general population, which would be around 60%. We also know that around 1 in 6 LGBT plus businesses are in retail, followed by around 16% in healthcare and 14% in professional services, which, if you compare that to general population across Canada, 12% would feature in construction, retail, trade, and also professional services and technical services. I think this is a really actually fascinating statistic. We do know that LGBT plus businesses contributed 1% of gross corporate revenue in Canada, and this represents a whopping $22 billion, which I think, again, shows the impact that LGBT plus businesses have across Canada. I want to just quickly cover some of the challenges which they face. We know it's extremely difficult being an LGBT plus business owner, which I think we're going to go through some of those challenges in a moment with our panel. But there are also, I suppose, unique difficulties faced by LGBT plus businesses as well. And just to go through some of them, we do know that, for example, around 46%, close to half, have purposely hidden the fact that they're LGBT and that the ownership is LGBT. We know that 1 in 3, have found that, by self-identifying, it's actually resulted in a loss of business. And we know that 28% have actually, unfortunately, experienced discrimination, which I think highlights some of those challenges. We also know that LGBT plus businesses, in terms of the challenges that they face, 57% reported that dealing with discrimination and lack of societal acceptance are also, key factors in the challenges which are being faced by businesses. And then I want to just cover quickly as well, just the overall business outlook. And there are some surprising results in this. If we're looking at the business outlook for LGBT plus businesses, we know that close to half are actually extremely enthusiastic about their businesses, which again is higher when you compare that to the total population of Canada, the general population. So I think it's good that our business owners are enthusiastic about their work and enthusiastic about the contribution that their businesses are making across Canada. And we also know as well that close to half of LGBT plus owners are extremely happy in their work. And again, that is higher if you compare that to the general population across Canada. And we do know as well, and I think this is a really interesting point, which I'm hoping to delve into more as we go further in our discussion. But we know that LGBT plus businesses are more likely to expect to increase number of employees, sales, diversity of employees, and number of markets in the next few years, again, when you compare that to total Canada. So to summarize, I think there's some really interesting statistics there, which I'd like to really delve into with our panelists. I think some of the key ones are that there's over 28,000 LGBT plus businesses across Canada. We know that LGBT plus businesses generate 1% of gross revenue. That's $22 billion, which I think is a phenomenal amount. And that equates to 435,000 full-time and part-time Canadian jobs in many services and in retail. So I think without further ado, I would like to explore some of these key findings with our panelists. So as I said, we are joined by Gavin Armstrong, founder and president of Lucky Iron Fish Enterprise, and also Dragon Slayer, who appeared on Dragon's Den and successfully so. Grant Minish, who is the regional manager of LGBTQ2 plus business development at TD Bank, and also by Babi Reset, founder and CEO of Virtual Gurus. So I think I might just turn to Grant first of all. Grant, you've a great experience working, directly with businesses through your work in financial institutions. I'm just wondering, from the study and the research study which was conducted, what resonates with you from that research study, and what have you been hearing on the ground?
Hi, Dale. Well, I guess, this study was done in 2019, and so probably some of the stories at that time are a little bit different than what we're dealing with right now and in the middle of this pandemic. And I think that's really thrown a twist into a lot of people's business plans and, how they're operating and how they want to come out of this. But I think a couple of things from the study that I found really interesting was around just sort of like the numbers, and they're big numbers, but I would have thought that potentially they should be a little bit larger. So I wonder if it's a bit understated. So I think that's something interesting to explore. And a couple other things that I really liked in the study was it appears that there's that LGBT businesses are probably a bit more risk averse, or not risk averse, but more willing to take on risk. When you start looking at the breadth of where they operate across Canada and internationally, so I think that's that was also really, really interesting. Obviously some of the challenges around discrimination are it's disappointing to see, but but we know that that's still a challenge in our society, and so something that we really need to look at. And I think, how do we help businesses address that? Because we really do need them to bring their whole selves to work, really, to be really successful, and we need small business to do very well. It's the backbone of our economy, so it's an important piece to look at and to resolve.
That's great, Grant. And I think turning now to one of our LGBT plus business owners, Gavin Armstrong, of course. Drawing from your own personal experience, what has been your experience as an LGBT plus business owner? And do any of the kind of key points in that research study stand out to you as an LGBT plus business owner?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. It's great to be a part of the Digital Summit this year. And congratulations on adapting into this new world. One of the findings of the report was that diverse-led businesses are risk takers, like Grant just said. And when we look at economic recovery measures coming out of COVID-19, we need new businesses that are going to take risk, to want to employ more Canadians, and who are going to want to have Canada be a country that is fostering economic growth. And so I think that this is a critical time for LGBT entrepreneurs to make their dreams a reality, to start a business, because the country needs new businesses. And it looks like from that report that we're an optimal group of people who can help make that happen.
That's awesome. And I think, Grant, one of the points which came out, and I think I emphasized this in the presentation, was that we represent 1% of gross revenue in Canada, $22 billion, and that's 28,000 jobs, or 28,000 businesses employing over 435,000 jobs. That's a sizable amount across the Canadian industry. From your work with TD Bank, how has that been turning into business for TD?
Well, as you know, we've TD spent a long time working in the LGBT plus community, and we've got a real focus on small business banking in particular. And so we've been able to do a lot of work with a lot of small businesses. And I think really it's about understanding the LGBT community and being able to connect with it authentically, uniquely, and being able to bring products and services to folks that are going to help entrepreneurs really thrive and grow their business. And if they're growing their business, they're adding employees, and they're they're making money, and they're contributing to the economy. And we're seeing some pretty big numbers. And I think that as we move forward and things sort of restart in this pandemic environment, or we're coming out of it, we're going to be able to see small businesses really pick up and really do very, very well. And and we're excited to be part of that solution for small business, for sure.
That's great, Grant. And actually, a reminder to everyone who's attending this session, in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can ask any question. Please feel free to ask questions, and I will do my best to ask our wonderful panelists throughout the session. So I think, turning to Gavin for a moment, one point of the study is that, compared to all across Canada, LGBT plus businesses are actually significantly younger in age than general population, mostly between 1 and 3 years in age. I suppose, Gavin, when you started your company, how was that experience, and what unique challenges did you face as an LGBT plus entrepreneur?
Well, first, I'm going to assume that you're calling me young, so thank you.
Of course.
I think one challenge that's always stuck with me, and it's something I still experience today, is raising capital. So when you're trying to fundraise for a business, you're trying to convince someone to invest a considerable amount of money into your idea, your dream, and your passion. And when you're young, you don't have a lot of experience to build off of. So you're already trying to convince someone that you're the right person who can turn that enterprise into something successful. But I've always felt challenged at a fear of being turned away as a result of homophobia. And so when I do pitches and when I'm trying to raise money, I often find I'm like toning myself down and trying to really not be my true authentic self. And that's not a very strong place when you're trying to exude confidence and trying to convince someone to believe in you. If you can't even, it doesn't look like you're believing in yourself. It's something I'm working on. I don't think I'm fully there yet. But I think it's a challenge that, in that report raised it as well, that LGBT business leaders find it sometimes difficult to raise money out of fear of being rejected for who they are. And so I think that's something that we as a community need to grow on, create fund opportunities for queer-led businesses, coaching, mentoring, support, because ultimately we should be investing in the idea, and it shouldn't matter what your orientation is.
I think that's a very interesting point, Gavin. One of my favorite drag queens, Panty Bliss, did a call to action in a theater once where she mentioned that members of the LGBT plus community, we often check ourselves, and we check ourselves too often. And I think that, that really builds upon your point. Grant, turning to you, have you found entrepreneurs and businesses who have been, coming to you, for financial services and advice? Have they had to, I suppose, check themselves if ever they're, I suppose, trying to deal with businesses across Canada or customers across Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have had conversations with lots of folks who own small businesses who've had challenges with that and have had to, you check yourself, or they're I think it's that whole thing about especially when you're trying to raise capital, you're looking for funding, you're looking at, risk, like all types of risk. And so one of those could be, do I need to tone myself down, and do I need to change my story a little bit around my sexual orientation, because that could be a risk and cause somebody to say no to me. And so for sure, we hear that happening, and which is unfortunate, because this should not be the case in 2020. And so I think it's it's really important for all of us to push against that, and to be thought leaders and find ways to help small business and queer small business move forward, find funding, raising capital. It's a challenge for everybody, but I think more so for LGBT companies. And I would also say when you look at this study and the information around sort of the age group and folks being a lot younger as they're getting into small business, or their own sole proprietorship or small company, I think part of the challenge with that also is when you're younger, you haven't had an opportunity to build a proper network. And so I think, like Gavin was saying, like having developing mentorship programs for young folks that are starting their companies, and helping to build networks that allow people to connect with maybe there's companies, LGBT owned companies that have been around much longer, that have elders, if you want to call them, and they can help us connect with one another. And those sorts of networks, I think, are really important to being successful, but also in raising capital, because you need a network to do that.
Of course, and then just Gavin, building on that, in the research study, we do know that sadly 1 in 3 businesses have experienced negativity and some forms of discrimination from being out. For LGBT plus entrepreneurs and businesses who are tuning in today, what advice would you have for them to combat that and to push back against any sort of negativity received? But I think also, one of the key points which I think we've seen across LGBT plus businesses, especially during the COVID period, has been perseverance. What advice would you have for those businesses?
That it can be really, really hard. I mean, any form of discrimination obviously it's difficult to look past. And I know that when you're running a business, you already feel such a burden, and you're already carrying so much on your shoulders that just any added stress, and especially unnecessary a stress like that, is just ridiculous that it still exists today. And that I mean, exists in all assets, all facts of life. But I think finding a network, a support group that you can talk to, that can understand what you're going through, has been critical for me. It takes an entrepreneur to know an entrepreneur, and to really be able to understand with the struggles. And so trying to find a support system, whether that's mentors or peers, who you can just, whether it's just getting advice or venting, being able to talk to someone who has an ear and they know what you're going through, I think is really important. So finding those support systems has really helped me, and I know that it's a critical resource to have.
That's great, Grant. I was going to turn to you next regarding, I suppose the sizes of LGBT plus businesses which you've been dealing with. Do you have any insights in terms of, what size are they generally, and are they building on the basis the fact that the data says around 75% are sole proprietors? Is that showing up in the business what you're doing with TD?
Oh yeah, for sure. When I saw those numbers, I was not surprised by that at all. Definitely, the folks that I'm dealing with here, primarily, people are sole proprietors, or small companies with maybe like less than 10 employees is typically the experience, for sure. You see some sort of mid-sized companies where we're looking at an employee population of, let's say, between 100 and 200, but primarily it's sole proprietor, and also the stats on just the industry type. I mean, from like a retail perspective, absolutely, retail and service seems to be definitely a niche for LGBT folks that are in business for themselves. And I think the third one in there was also in sort of like the medical services space, and also you see there's lots of doctors, lawyers, dentists, that kind of stuff. So yeah, the data for me was not surprising in that part.
One thing I do want to turn back to, actually, Gavin, is I'm a big believer in lifting up the next generation. I think it's imperative for leaders who have come through and have achieved success in their own regard. I think that's very important then to inspire the next generation of leaders and business leaders, for that matter. So you mentioned the importance of building those connections and supporting those entrepreneurs. What do you think needs to happen to support the next level of entrepreneurs and to support the next level of LGBT plus leaders?
Well, I think one of the most important things you can do is have a chamber like the CGLCC. When I started Lucky Iron Fish, I wasn't aware that the chamber existed. I wasn't in a big city at the time, and I did feel quite alone. I would go to other business events and meet other business leaders, but I always felt sort of like the odd one out. And since joining the chamber, being able to attend the events, attend a conference like this, you meet so many inspiring business leaders who you can really look to for help. And I mean, especially during right now with COVID-19, the chamber having those weekly sessions where they bring in a speaker, talk about programs that are available for small businesses, being able to ask questions that can go to the government with an authoritative body. I mean, the chamber carries a lot of heft with it. So finding an association like this chamber, I think has been really really great for our business, and it comes all back to building a strong network. So finding those network opportunities that you can use to get allies for yourself.
Thank you for that, Gavin. I would like to remind people attending that in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, feel free to ask questions. I will try pose them to our panelists and hold them to account on answers. I also would like to apologize. Babi, unfortunately, I think was having some technical difficulties, and given that this is a live event, you know, things can go wrong, and unfortunately, I think I don't think we'll be able to have her participate. But moving forward, though, I just want to turn to one of the questions which has come in here from Bruce. And this is regarding, Grant, your previous point around the representation, and that you were surprised that the figures might have been a bit low, actually, in terms of the report. So, you know, the US has estimated that their LGBT plus business community is around 1.4 million. So therefore, you'd logically think from that Canada would be closer to 140,000, dividing by 10. So therefore, do we think that the levels of discrimination in the report has actually been diminished? So is the report underestimating the actual impact and the difficulty that it is being an LGBT plus entrepreneur? Like, I think I mentioned it earlier on, it's really difficult. And I don't have to tell Gavin how difficult it is to be an entrepreneur, but it is compounded heavily being an LGBT plus entrepreneur. What are your thoughts on that, Grant?
So yeah, a couple thoughts on that one, and definitely I think it is difficult to be an LGBT entrepreneur. And my life pre-TD, I actually was a small business entrepreneur, and definitely faced all these types of discrimination. Like it was definitely challenging and really impacted my ability to be successful. So I think that's certainly that certainly is a factor, and you know, it's still a factor today. You know, in a study like this one, we're really asking folks to self-disclose, and so are they prepared to do so? And they may not be because of this fear. And I think the second piece of it too can also be maybe the other side, is sometimes people are they're not interested in disclosing. They're in their business for their business, and their sexual orientation has nothing to do with their business or how they want to identify. So I think there's probably a couple of factors that are involved in the study, and you know, I think this is the first one of its kind. There's not been a lot of studies done on LGBT small business in Canada, so. I think this is like an amazing first step, and it has a lot of information in it, and it might actually ask more questions that it answers.
I think so too, actually. And I noticed we have Babi back. Babi, do we have your audio live?
I believe so. I think I'm good.
Awesome. Great, you are back. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And I know I was just explaining to the panel that, you know, this is a live event and this is the first time we've ever done it. So, of course, technical difficulties will appear, you know, spontaneously at that. So thank you very much for persevering, and it's great to have you. I suppose I might actually, while I have you, just pose a question to you, just to move the conversation on a bit. From the research study, we know that LGBT plus businesses overwhelmingly tend to hire from other diverse groups, women, Indigenous, etc. So as Startup Canada's Indigenous Entrepreneur of the Year for 2019, I believe, congratulations again on that. I'm wondering if you can perhaps provide some thoughts on that and some reflections on that fact.
Yeah, you know, thank you. And sorry, guys, for the tech issues. Yeah, so, you know, I feel that if we have more companies that are basing themselves on impact, you know, that more people will open up to hiring more Indigenous folks or LGBT, and have more of that passion and compassion towards the marginalized folks, as well as groups of minorities. And so with Virtual Gurus, that's what we do. We make sure that we try to hire based on those facts, because often LGBT employees or, you know, minority groups are left at the bottom of the barrel, and people don't give them a chance. And that's something that I personally have lived through myself. And so I think that if we try to get all of the businesses and get all startup groups focusing on that, that we will notice a change. And with Virtual Gurus, we've tried focusing on that, especially in this last year. And I've noticed a change here. In Alberta, it's a little bit harder, but we're making change out here for sure.
And Bobby, just to build on that, we do have a question which I think fits in nicely into this point. So, as an LGBT plus business owner, how do you maintain diversity and LGBT plus representation within your business, without being exclusive or I suppose even discriminatory in your own right, in that regard?
Right. So, it's a lot of people that do come to work at Virtual Gurus, they often Google me or they Google Virtual Gurus and they see that we're a company of diversity and inclusion. In fact, we actually have our statistics on our website as far as how many people of color we have, how many LGBT people we have, and we let our clients see that. Second to that, we make sure that when we're onboarding new contractors, which we have hundreds of them now, we make sure that they see our statement, and it's our diversity and inclusion statement. And we also do have quite a few trans folks that work for us. We have had clients say, I don't really want to work with this person. And we send the client our diversity and inclusion statement. And, we're trying to also educate the clients at the same time. We've built our culture around it from the beginning. But again, this last year, we really focused on driving that culture home. And we basically classify ourselves as just that, that we are a company based on diversity and inclusion.
I think that's very interesting. Like, I've certainly seen, and it's becoming more and more prevalent, businesses are actually publishing the data, publishing the diversity and inclusion data, publishing their, human resource statistics. So, really they're being publicly accountable. And I think that's a really interesting point. Gavin, what are your thoughts on, I suppose, in order to encourage diversity across Canada and across businesses, do you think that is something which Canada should move towards? If you look at supplier diversity, for example, we see that it's target driven. That X% of procurement spend must be from diverse suppliers, and I wonder, is it important for that data to be published and to publish those targets and to be held accountable in that regard?
So it's an interesting question. I definitely believe in accountability, and I think that if you have targets and you publish them, then you can be held to them, and if you're not achieving them, then we can ask why. But you also want to worry that you're not being just put into one box. And so you could say, well, yeah, we've checked off that ratio, and therefore the job is done. Diversity is accomplished, because we always should be striving for more. And so I think that we have to understand the why. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of encouraging policies that are promoting diverse suppliers? Because I do think it is important. I think that it helps encourage diverse companies and diverse entrepreneurs to create companies. But we just want to make sure that we're always pushing that standard to be higher, and not just setting that as sort of the new standard.
Awesome. Thank you, Gavin. I'd like to, I'm just conscious of our time as well, I'd like us to be forward thinking now for a moment. I think, I would like to see, and I'm sure everyone on this panel would like to see, more LGBT plus businesses owned, operated, opened, and thriving across Canada, the US, and the world. So, Grant, I might turn to you first off for this question. What needs to happen to ensure that LGBT plus businesses across Canada are increasing in numbers, are succeeding in their business strategy, and also, I suppose, moving Canada forward?
I think that, I too would like to see that. And I think that it's really about how do you provide proper incentives and proper networking. And so this could be, thought leadership from large corporations, like companies like TD, who are really trying to move the social structure forward. And what do you have as incentives from government? Because I agree with Gavin. I don't think setting if you want to call it a quota, is the way to go. It's really more about how do you show people how and why this is a good idea, and what's the benefit for them. So I think those are the kinds of things that we need to start to see. Again, still, back to the networking. Like, folks need to be able to network and to be successfit's so this is where I think something like the supplier diversity program is really good. It's maybe not for everyone, but it's a program certainly that it would be great to see more large companies in Canada actively on board and actively promoting it. And when you do that, then you're going to have a lot more small business becoming certified, gaining access, getting sort of front of the line treatment, and being able to network and do business where potentially they may not have been able to do it before.
Gavin, I think then same question to you, and I obviously understanding that COVID-19 has pushed everything aside in many regards. I think people have to, businesses have been looking at just trying to survive and to get through the past months and the months forthcoming. What needs to happen to get more businesses, more LGBT plus businesses, more LGBT plus entrepreneurs set up across Canada?
I think the common themes that we've heard throughout this talk are mentorship, awareness, and access to capital. I think that creating opportunities to be aware that get this Nielsen report out and show that the LGBT businesses are generating $22 billion a year in revenue. That's an incredible amount of money for this country. Have mentorship to help guide through the process. What's it like to run a business? What are the highs? What are the lows? How do you make it happen? And then how do you pay for it? Let's get access to capital, access to venture capital funds, to angel investment. These funds exist in Canada. We know that the world needs help. There are a lot of impact-driven funds to help fund solutions for our planet. But we also need to be investing in companies that can also be the solution. We need companies that support equality, diversity, advocating for justice. And so by having capital access, then we can, I think, achieve growth in LGBT businesses.
Yeah, there's a term in the UK and Ireland, the pink pound. I think the pink dollar certainly doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easily or sound quite as nice. But I think getting that capital, getting that funding to small and medium-sized businesses across Canada in a targeted way, I think is going to be very important. Bobby, same question to you. What needs to happen to get the next generation of LGBT plus businesses and entrepreneurs off the ground, succeeding and thriving and really making that impact? And also increasing the $22 billion. We want that at least doubled.
That's crazy. And I just closed a 1.25 million round. And to be honest, it took me I believe it was to do with the fact that as a woman and as Indigenous and I'm LGBT, is that it took me over a year to close that round. And I went through 170 no's. As 170 people said no to me, well, 10 said yes to me finally. And I think that statistically that if we, just as Gavin had said, if we start holding ourselves accountable, start holding those VCs accountable, the angels accountable, try getting everybody out there to understand and be more support to people, showing people that there are businesses out there that are successfully run by LGBT people. We really need to unite a little bit more on that. And, when going through all those no's, I literally was kind of beside myself thinking, what am I going to do now? Thinking we were going to have to shut virtual tours down. And I started going after the impact funds, and that's where we ended up getting the yeses. So we need more impact funds, just as Gavin said. We need more access to capital through people that want to shout it out that they are investing into LGBT companies. And I think if we do that, as well as accelerators for LGBT startups, would be really, really good. And I think, you know, there's just so much more that we can do. And just like Grant said, I think if we start really kind of shouting it out and really showing people the upsides of businesses that are run by LGBT, maybe more people will listen. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, Bobby. And I think I see Patricia has coined a new phrase. I think diversity dollar, I think, is what we should call it. Pink pound, diversity dollar, I think, is what we should go with. I want to read out one comment which I think is quite interesting, and it's from Christopher. So he says, just an observation, but as a consultant, so I assume business consultant, I often see I need to go back into the closet for each client until I know what their environment is and if it's accepting. I have never thought about how I modify my style based on interactions with others, but I do tend to minimize, quote, gay qualities. And I think that's a really interesting perspective. Certainly, you know, I previously worked in consulting as well, and I do know what it's like to, every couple of weeks, enter a new environment, and you aren't sure about what it's like and if it's accepting. Just to close out, because I know we're coming up on time, and I think I'll start with Gavin. Gavin, if you can use one word to describe your experience as a LGBT plus entrepreneur, what would it be?
Fabulous.
Fabulous. Love it. Bobby, if you could choose one word to describe your experience as an LGBT plus entrepreneur.
Trying. Exciting.
Trying. And Grant, I know you were an entrepreneur in the past and business owner. If you were to choose one word to describe your experience as an LGBT plus entrepreneur, what would it be?
Amazing.
So we have fabulous, trying, and amazing. I think that's on that note. I think that's a great trio to end with. So look, I just want to first of all thank you all to my panelists for joining us today. We've Gavin Armstrong, founder and president of Lucky Iron Fish Enterprise and Dragon Slayer. We have Grant Manish, regional manager of LGBTQ2+ business development with TD, who is also our presenting sponsor, and we also have Bobby Reset, founder and CEO of Virtual Gurus. Thank you very much for joining us today. And just before we close out today's session, a reminder that this is obviously a free event, and if you found this content enjoyable, and indeed any of the content we've produced so far, in the screen below us in the description box, there is a donate link should you wish to do so. Thanks again to my panelists, and goodbye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.